So this morning, I was thinking about some things, about topics that I could discuss with you guys. And I want you all to know that Joe and I are not experts at any of this. We're parents of 6 special needs kids. For any lack of a better term, I'm not really too keen on that term. I do think that all kids are special needs, frankly, but ours just, we have a little bit extra going on here, and we're not experts at any of this stuff. But one of the things that I thought might be kind of fun to talk to you guys about today is chronological age versus developmental age. Now, oftentimes in the comments, I'll see these things that say, she talks down to those kids. She talks to she meaning me. I don't know who they think is reading the comments, but it's she meaning me. But at any rate, and I appreciate that kind of feedback, because in this community that we have here, we're all learning from each other, right? And I can learn from you and do learn from you guys all the time. And, back and forth it goes. I think that's really cool. But this one gets me because, she talks down to the kids. She treats them like they're baby. She talks to them like they're toddlers. And for those of you who are new here, a lot of times you'll ask me how old the kids are. And Hannah's 26. David just turned 22. Bethany is 21. Okay, let's see, who's next? Abby is 20. Jesse is 20. Obed is 15. Hopefully I didn't leave anybody out there. But those are their chronological ages. That's how old they are. But developmentally, my kids tend to be more immature than what their chronological age presents. They present younger. So I want you to know that I have become very aware that I do this, and mostly because you all have, some of the people have pointed that out to me. And so I am aware of it and I am working on it. However, I think that I want to present my side to that and explain to you why it is sometimes very, very difficult. Now, I do believe in kind of meeting people where they're at, and let's talk about Jessie first. Now, she's a 20-year-old woman, but she presents in many ways like a toddler, or in some ways even like an infant. And so in order to progress Jessie in her vocabulary, in her language, in her ability to understand and communicate, sometimes we have to walk back the way that we're talking to her. Now, if you think about like nursery rhymes and children's songs, a lot of you have seen our music therapy videos. So you kind of get an idea about how all of that works. And the reason that works in young children is because they're very simple, one-syllable words. They rhyme, they're repetitive, there's a rhythm and a cadence, a sing-songy way. A lot of times you'll see, teachers of preschoolers and kindergartners, they have, that very sing-songy way about them, the way they present things to the kids. That's how they learn. And so you'll see Jessie like singing London Bridge and I'm a Little Teapot, and all of these songs that are very, very juvenile for a 20-year-old woman. And yet it's what works for her. It's where she's at. And, and it's very difficult sometimes to come up. If I talk to Jessie the way I do a lot of you are Jessie's age in the comments, and we can communicate on a higher level, a more adult level. You have your vocabulary, you have your wisdom, your understanding, you're better able to process words, information, and ideas. And so we can communicate on that level. But Jessie's not able to do that. And so I kind of go in and out with her. You'll see that a lot of times. And a lot of it is just out of necessity. It's very similar with Obed. Obed is probably farther behind than Jesse is in his developmental age. And yet we're seeing an awful lot of progress with Obed. And we'll sit around sometimes, we're seeing this a lot at dinner time lately, where we'll sit around and we'll be joking. Joe's into these puns lately, and he's found these websites and YouTube channels, I guess, because they're really into these punny things, Hannah, and kind of corny jokes and dad jokes, I guess you could call them. So, but we'll get, Joe will be telling those jokes to Hannah, and we'll start every once in a while, when we burst out laughing. Obed will too. And it's not, you can tell that it's not just because we're laughing. I think there's something to that. But I think that he understands that, whether he understands the joke on, a deeper level, he understands that there's humor and that it's funny and that it is appropriate to laugh because everyone else is laughing. And so these things are really promising in their progress. And so we meet Obed and Jesse where they're at. Where they're at is a very low developmental age level. And, we understand how old they are. Obed's about ready to be a 10th grader. And we're new homeschoolers. This is our second year homeschooling. But Obed is on a non-academic track. He gets mostly therapy, life skills, that sort of thing. And so Obed, his curriculum, even when he was at school, is not at the level of a typical 10th grader. So there's kind of a give and take there. Yes, we need to be aware of their age, but we also need to be aware of their developmental age. Now, I'd like to go through the communication with all these kids. I'm just going to think of little examples and anecdotes, for each of the kids. It's kind of interesting. David, I love communicating with David. David and I will get into some very deep philosophical conversations. David's ideas and opinions about things are vastly different from mine. He's 22 years old. He's about ready to be in his 4th year at college. I don't know if he's going to graduate this year. I think he's a little bit short. It may go into another semester. But at any rate, he's a very smart guy. And he spends a lot of time researching, and he's very open-minded, and he's constantly thinking about every aspect of everything. But David is a bit of a smart ass, okay? Like a lot of people, and I don't mean any offense about this. Everyone's personality is different. And I'm not saying that every 22-year-old college kid is a smart ass, but David is, okay? And so that comes into his communication. Now, David is very, very advanced in his language skills, his reasoning, his intellect, everything. But David is still a little bit on the immature side socially. Now, I don't talk to David like he's a 2-year-old. I talk to David like he's 22, because he is able to understand what I'm saying and reason and logic through that. But one of my favorite things with David, I think it's really important for young people to hear what older people have to say and their experiences. I also think it's equally important for older people to really listen to what younger people are saying and kind of open your minds to new ideas and things. And I think that we can all generationally, I think we have a lot to offer each other and can learn a lot from each other. So one of my favorite things with David when we're communicating is to kind of play devil's advocate with him a little bit. The other day, what was it? Oh, he was saying how he felt like the education system, the public education system, was full of inequality because he was under the impression that only homeowners who pay property taxes. He understood that the schools are paid for through property taxes, but he was somehow under the impression that only homeowners were able to access that education. And it was very interesting to watch his face and the enlightenment that just washed over him when I explained to him that no, the homeowners, the landowners, the people who pay property taxes are paying for the education in the schools for everyone. So you don't have to be a landowner to access that. David was shocked when he found that out. It was, to me, it seems like a pretty simple concept, but he had not really thought that all the way through. And so it was a very interesting conversation. Again, I don't talk to him like he's a toddler, but I just try to present ideas and facts and information to him so that he can then, kind of sift through that and figure things out on his own. So it's all very interesting here. Hannah, you'll notice that Hannah she has got what we used to call Asperger's, okay? It's a very high functioning form of autism. And Hannah has a processing disability where she has a lot of trouble processing ideas and information. It's kind of funny. She's absolutely hilarious sometimes, and we don't pick on Hannah. We don't say things to her for the purpose of like mocking her or making fun of her or ridiculing her or things like that. We say things to Hannah that seem obvious to get her to think it through. And if you'll notice, even our last video where we were talking, we went out to lunch and we talked to you guys about the phone booths and the cryptocurrency and all that. Well, at the end of the video, I don't know how many of you noticed this, but Hannah had purchased on her travel training, she had purchased some hand soap with her own money. And she was explaining how she had gone to the checkout and she had paid $2.49 for this hand soap. And then she went through the process of how she had to give, the money to the cashier and that sort of thing. So I said to her, oh, so did they have a 2 for $5 deal? We had talked about this a week ago with Hannah because the hand soap, she bought one, and I explained to her, you go through so much hand soap, it's okay to buy 2 for $5. It's the same as buying 1 for $2.50. But it doesn't oftentimes click with her. Just like the spices with her quiche, what I have to do in my communication with Hannah, and again, I speak to Hannah like an adult because she has an ability to process the words and the information. It's remarkable, really, how she's very articulate in her speech and very, she can communicate very well with language. And but oftentimes I will have to prompt her. It's like, Hannah, okay, so you made the quiche. Tell me what spices were in the quiche. And well, I didn't ask Kelsey, her job coach. And I said, well, and then she said, well, when I prompted her, like I don't always give her the answers, but I will prompt her and guide her and lead her down the path so that she comes up with the answer. She knows the answers to these things. She knows somewhere in her knower that $2.50 means that 2 bottles are $5. Somewhere she does know and remember the spices that she used in the quiche, but she might need a prompting and a guide to go down that path. She came to me last night and she said, the trash can in the morning room is full. Should I empty it? And so I in turn, I say to her, now, Hannah, what do you think? What do you think you should do about that? And then she's like, oh, I should probably empty that. So it's very interesting and very complicated. I do hear Jesse coming up the stairs right now, so I'm going to pause this and I'll come back to you in a few minutes and we'll talk about the other kids. But if you guys think that this is interesting and, if you have some anecdotes about your own children, your own parents, your own methods of communication, how you prefer to communicate or whatever, put those in the comments below and then maybe we'll get some ideas for some future videos and some conversations that we can have together as a community. Everyone seems to be all settled in again, so I think that we can continue this conversation. How about we talk about Abby? Now, Abby is, those of you who've been around, that Abby does have moderate to severe intellectual disability. And so I'll tell you something about Abby. Abby never ceases to amaze us. She has done remarkably and far and away better than we ever expected that she would in her entire life. Abby's doing extremely well. She's doing extremely well in her ability to retain information, in her ability to communicate. Abby just blows my mind sometimes. So a couple of examples with Abby. Now, Abby did not actually talk at all until she was about 6 or 7 years old. And what happened, it's a funny story, and it's a story for another video, but our entire family was in a hotel room, all of us together for 2 entire months. And so it was kind of like, I think of it as almost like a total immersion kind of language thing for Abby, because that's where she learned how to communicate and how to speak and how to say her first word. We were all sitting around in the room, and Joel had a bunch of his friends had stopped by this hotel room. We were all sitting around and just talking, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, Abby said, "Fruit." And we're like, what? She said, fruit. Abby wanted some fruit. And that was the first word she ever spoke. So what happened with Abby when she was really little and she was in school, they taught her sign language, a few signs, and like she learned the sign for more, and she had started to kind of let us know what her needs and her wants were through basic little signs. I'm not going to pretend that I know very many of them. We do know this one more because that one works really well, and it did for Abby. She was able to tell us, that she wanted more. Well, the signing then it kind of advanced into echolalia. Echolalia is where the kids will repeat things. They repeat words that you're saying. And oh man, I tell you what, in the early years, this used to drive us bonkers. Sometimes I look back and I think, it's pretty remarkable. And the fact that she was able to do that and advanced in, so well in her ability to communicate in her language it really is miraculous. But we would say a word, Abby would repeat the word. You were not getting a conversation of any kind. She was simply repeating words, and then the words turned into little phrases, and Abby would repeat the phrases. Next thing you know, it's sentences. And as you all know, and you have watched her progress, even in the 3 years, it's just now 3 years that we've been on YouTube doing these videos, and the progress that you all have seen has been remarkable. Well, there were a lot of years of progress leading up to that, even to where she is now, where Abby she can engage fully in a conversation. Abby can initiate a conversation. Abby has ideas of her own. Now they're not super advanced and well thought out ideas, but I tell you what we're seeing lately is that Abby she has become very self-motivated. So she retains information, and as she has been watching her siblings do various tasks and chores around the house, Abby is taking it upon herself to pick up and do some of those chores and things on her own, which is remarkable. A few nights ago, we took her for a walk. We went out, Joe and I, a lot of times after the kids are settled in, we'll take Arnie out, and we'll go for a little walk in our neighborhood. And we took Abby with us this one night, and she was kind of having a little trouble with her O&M, her orientation and mobility skills, and, her cane. And she was kind of kind of regressing back to where she was all over the place. And, and so we kind of had to work with her on the way down on our walk. And on the way back, I said to her, Abby, just take the route that you used to take with the school bus. If you can remember what you did when you got off the school bus, do that. And you go home and we'll meet you there. And so lo and behold, she did it without any further prompting, she just did it. Now, mind you, it had been a year since she had done that. So Abby's ability to retain information and to communicate her wants and needs is very, very good. And it's progressing and maturing all the time. A few things that we have trouble with Abby. It's hard. She'll speak a half of a sentence, and rather than complete the sentence for her, and this can be painful at times, but rather than complete that for her, we will prompt her. What is it that you want, Abby? What do you need? What are you trying to tell me? Can you please speak up, speak clearly, that sort of thing. But we don't speak to Abby like she's a toddler. We probably don't go full on 20-year-old communication with her. I'm sure that we've kicked it down, a few notches to later childhood, kind of thing, when we are trying to communicate with her and get her to reciprocate and communicate back. So Abby's very interesting. She's one to watch. She's an amazing girl. And she really, the best way to sum up everything that's going on with Abby is that she just never ceases to amaze us. She's a pretty remarkable girl. Now we're moving on to Bethany. She's an amazing young woman herself, and she is very easygoing. Bethany does have intellectual disability, and so she can communicate very, very well. But what Bethany does, and you probably don't pick up on this a lot on the videos, because guys, you know what? When we put our kids out here on these videos, we really are emphasizing their strengths. We're not going to make a big deal of their weaknesses or even necessarily let everyone see that. We are showing and sharing with you their strengths and their abilities. And what Bethany will do is she repeats not so much words and the language, but Bethany repeats ideas. Now, that's not to say that she doesn't have her own opinions about things. She is well able to develop those opinions, and we will always present both many sides. We try to get our kids always to think for themselves. That's a big thing in our household, because when you're dealing with this particular population that is vulnerable, one of the things that we do to promote their independence is that we're constantly trying to teach them how to think for themselves. And, it's like, I even tell the kids, don't believe everything I tell you. Don't listen to everything I say. I mean, you do because I'm your mom, but you don't have to adapt, adopt, believe, regurgitate, for lack of a better word, every single thing that I believe or I think. You can take that, you can take what you hear, other places and from other people, and you go and you research it and you figure out for yourself and you think about these things and you determine what it is that you think and you believe. So Bethany is working on that. She really has come a long way. Bethany is just, she's so easygoing, and she is always so willing to please us, and she's very happy to help out. I have to really watch Bethany to make sure that, that she gets what she needs emotionally, and, if she needs a break or a day out for lunch or whatever she needs, I have to really pay very close attention to that, because, Bethany is one who would sacrifice her own needs and probably not even realize she was doing that. So a lot of the communication that I have with Bethany is I have to kind of pay attention to her, how she's acting. I have to watch her facial expressions. I have to, make sure that she's getting, the right things to eat, because she's so easygoing, and she'll just, she won't always speak up. And so we work on these things with her too, and she's come a long way. She's one to watch too. Don't let her kid you. She's got some ideas of her own too, and she's not afraid to share those in the proper context and time. So and she's had quite a few experiences in her life too. There's one very important point that I tend to forget about, and I think it's very, very important to let you all know just how much information that people learn visually from the time that they are a very young child. And this kind of goes back to speaking to David and his social immaturity, if you will. There's so much information that comes into our brains visually, like most of it. And so that really is a very difficult thing to overcome. There is a level of communication where we as parents are constantly having to explain things that we take for granted to our kids, so that they kind of they're able to start to learn and read a room, and start to understand. Sarcasm is a very difficult thing to pick up on. Obviously, they're not able to read body language. They're not able to get any input necessarily from those visual cues at all. And so, when you go to try to communicate with anyone who's blind, whether they have an additional disability or not, it's very important to approach the person, say hello, tell them who you are. Don't make them guess. Don't make them guess. They usually can. They usually know you by your voice, but that's something that you don't really want to, that can be very embarrassing if somebody doesn't remember you or whatever. And nobody wants to play guessing games. That's something that's very demeaning to our community when you're trying to communicate with them, which is very difficult when you're not around blind people or visually impaired people very often. Learning how to communicate with them, or how to communicate. One of my favorites is that people will always talk really loud around our kids, or they will address us and they won't address our kids. I don't know what people think. And it's like, we'll get in the car later and we'll say, well, they obviously don't know that you're not deaf, that you are able to hear, and that you are able to respond and answer for yourself. So one of the things that we do, like when we go out to restaurants and things, we will always have the kids order for themselves. That, unless we're just getting like pizza or group things or whatever, or if we're in a hurry and dad's just ordering for everyone. But typically when we go out, these kids will order their own meals. Everyone, including Abby, will address the server, and I think it's a great form of education for both the server and our kids. Our kids learn how to face the people, how to speak up, how to articulate their words, tell them what they want, ask them questions if they need to. And I think it's really good for the servers too. And people do pick up on these things. They begin to learn how to communicate with those who are blind and have, intellectual disabilities or anything else that might be going on. And so it's all very interesting. The dynamics in our family are pretty interesting sometimes. This whole idea about, chronological age versus developmental age, it's a thing. It's a big thing. And, we always want to be mindful of our children, or those of you who are working in the community, your students, clients, whoever you're working with. It's really important to always approach that with their dignity and their best interests in mind and at heart. And I do hope that you guys see that we are doing that here. And, we make mistakes. We're not perfect, and you only see little bits and pieces, but that's one of the things that I wanted to explain to you. just found out that Zoe is leaving us. So as these things go, as things work, it's gonna be okay. We have to be very flexible. I'm sure that we'll have another music therapist come in here, but I just now found out it won't be our beloved Zoe. That's just how it goes sometimes. It's just how it goes.